think the coding world, the engineering world has already figured out that documentation is just incredibly important, right? Like, what do you do if you go into your GitHub account and there's no readme, right? You do nothing because you're like, I don't know what this code does. I'm not going to slog through it just to figure out that it like, you know, sorts lists alphabetically and that's it. Uh, you know, the data world is just a little bit behind still, and so there just isn't. There aren't really great practices around documentation, right?
My name is Joseph, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dataframe. And Dataframe is a data quality management company. And currently, we're focused on making great data discovery and documentation software for data teams. So that includes data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, and even product managers. I founded this company with Robert and Kevin, my two other co-founders, early this year. And prior to Dataframe, I worked as an early member of the data science team at a company called Wayfair, and I was also a founding member at a company called Quanco, which is an enterprise data science company. And previous to that, I was a computational biology researcher at Harvard, and that's where I really got my career started as a data scientist. I helped build Quanco, which is the enterprise data science company that I talked about, which I joined and helped found after my journey at Wayfair. And at Quanco, I had the great pleasure of working with very large clients across the world. So a large e-commerce company in Japan, I work with Wayfair, work with a large e-commerce company on the West Coast, also large insurance and financial services companies in Western Europe as well. And what I realized during my time in working with these clients was that at the start of each project, we would spend so much time trying to understand the context around the data assets that we're trying to consume. Before doing any sort of analysis, before doing any type of modeling, before writing any code, any models into production, we would spend weeks or even months trying to understand, okay, if I'm trying to calculate this value, this KPI or this metric, how do I get this data? Who do I talk to? And what columns do I have to compute? Which tables do I have to join? What are the replications in this data system? What is the truth on this data? And so high level, just the context around the data assets that I was consuming before we did any kind of sophisticated analysis. So that was always a huge, huge pain point at every single project that I led at Quanco. And I always knew that this was a big problem, but I didn't really think much of it until I started to talk about this problem with Robert. And we quickly discovered that a company like Airbnb had already built a tool, an internal tool, to solve this exact problem, which is the problem of data discovery, data context discovery. And Robert and I also realized that other more data-forward companies like Lyft, like LinkedIn, like Facebook, like Spotify, they had built something very similar to what we were thinking that was important. So that got us thinking, if this problem is not isolated to my own experience, this is not isolated to Robert's own experience, then there's something there in this market. People want this type of product. But another thing that Robert had realized is that not every company has the financial resources that Airbnb has or what Wayfair has. Not every company has 100 or 200 or 300 data scientists. So people don't have the budget to create great internal tooling. So one of the things that we wanted to do in this company was to really democratize the data stack that a company like Airbnb has to the rest of the world.
So I'm Robert. I am the Chief Data Officer at Dataframe, and I largely handle all things, I suppose, product level at Dataframe. So it's a lot of deciding what gets built, how we should build it, and sort of um, what's sort of optimal for our end users. Having been a data scientist myself before I joined Dataframe, um, uh, it gives me a bit of like, I guess, product intuition. So before I joined Dataframe, I was a data scientist at Airbnb, and before that, I was a data scientist at Wayfair. And before that, I was at MIT getting my PhD in geophysics. At this point, as Joseph alluded to, Wayfair and Airbnb both have a data discovery tool. But when I was at Wayfair, there were only really inklings of this, and so I felt this problem of like getting data context super acutely, right? Uh, I could, if I wanted to find new tables, I just had to go ask my other coworkers, ask friends, um, basically like spend days talking to people, trying to figure out if there's other things that I could use. Whereas it was sort of a binary change when I went to Airbnb and they had data portal, and at my fingertips I could just search like active listings or some sort of like detailed information about hosts at Airbnb. I could just do it, right? It would just take 10 seconds. I could figure out who the owner was. I could ping them and say like, is this safe to use? And they would say yes, and then we would just move on. I mean, it would basically cut that journey down from what was probably like 2 hours over a couple days down to minutes. Right?
Yeah, and one of the things that we found was that a lot of the internal tooling, by their nature of being internal tools, they're built very specifically for the company that it originated from. So like the architecture of the internal tools for data discovery at Airbnb is very different from that of Lyft and from that of LinkedIn, etc. So one of the things that we found was that in a lot of cases, these internal data discovery tools were open sourced, so anybody could, in theory, take that and use that in their own organization. But what we have found was that in a lot of cases, because these data discovery tools were very purpose-built for the specific organization, it was very hard to implement for companies that were not like LinkedIn, they were not like Airbnb, they were not like Lyft. That was one of the things that we discovered. And secondly, philosophically, we have a difference in opinion of what this data discovery and documentation tool should be. And that difference in opinion is that this should be a very elegant and simple to use note-taking tool, a wiki tool, a discovery tool, much like Notion or in the same design philosophy as Slack or Figma, these newer types of tools that are very consumer friendly. And we didn't see any of that in the market, which is that prosumer friendliness of the tooling. It was a lot of tooling out there were really focused on either the advanced user, or they're very complicated to set up, or they were just patched together with system specifications maybe given to them by a CTO or CDO, but were really not empathetic to the user needs on an individual level. So we wanted to fill that gap in the market. We have been very, very focused on product in the past year. So we rewrote our product at least 3 times before we got to this version. So we were very, very careful in terms of making mock-ups and making sure that that really conveyed the principles that we have in terms of productivity, really making sure that the product is very delightful to use, and really making sure that each feature that we're working on is pretty optimized for the user experience. So we've been working hard on that. One of the things that we've been doing is also working on an open source version of the product to help users get their hands on an open source version and building a community around the effort around data quality and data productivity and so forth. So we've been working on those efforts. We're about to release our invite-only release of Dataframe with the data discovery and data documentation features that we've been talking about. and we're pretty excited to get our early users using this beta version of the product. We were very pleasantly surprised by the community that we formed around Whale, our open source data discovery product. We previously hypothesized that only really people in North America would really empathize with the product and use the product. But we were very surprised to see users and even active contributors from Canada, from Mexico, from Brazil, from Berlin, from London, from Korea, etc. So that was a really exciting thing for us to see.
It really helped us realize like, yeah, this problem is becoming a big problem very, very fast. Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely global. And on top of that, obviously, like we do have this sort of typical cast of characters. We're in conversations, or not really conversations, but like we've been talking to people who are using this at some of the bigger name tech companies, which is also really cool to see. We had a Medium post where we shared this. Joseph and I posted this to our networks, and I think it went a little bit viral, at least within our networks and our extended networks. I think largely it's just still trickle in. I am like trying to reach out to a few select people directly just to get some opinions from some colleagues or people in different fields that are interesting to me. But outside of that, I think it's largely just been organic interest, which is really exciting.
Please come visit us on our website at dataframe.ai. And if you request for an invite with some user details, for example, what kind of data warehouse are you using and what is your business email and so forth, and we will get to you as soon as we're able and let you into our private beta. We are working with a very small group of customers, early customers that we've been working with for the past few months. So we'll get to them first, but we'll slowly release some invite codes every week afterward.
Also, just find us on LinkedIn. Joseph and I are pretty friendly, so feel free to just reach out and say hi as well.
Hey, let's do this together. No, that's terrible. I can't do that. Don't use that.